Yeah, so we're doing Perek Daled. And this is very, very fundamental, and they should teach us in every yeshiva, which of course they don't. Certainly before people start going out, they should teach it. But of course, we don't teach about love in the yeshiva. So, Perek Daled, B'shorish Ava, the root of love. There's nobody in this world doesn't have a spark of power of giving. That you'll see with this with your simcha. He mentions the way people don't go to restaurants by themselves because it's not the same experience. You want to experience with somebody else, right? Everybody wants to be part and parcel of an experience which they're sharing with somebody else. Also, the yearning for society, which is very, very profound, very, very profound place. And this is the evidence. The punishment of being in prison, even in a very nice prison, even house arrest, is considered to be separation from society. It's considered to be a severe punishment. People like to be part of society. So it's not that you need, to exercise that privilege. As long as I have the opportunity, when I want to do it, I don't feel deprived if I'm not doing it. But the moment you take away me the opportunity to interact with society, I feel this is a tremendous, tremendous punishment. So what are these yearnings that we have? So Rav Dessler argues, it's got to be. Why would a person yearn for to have society? Why a person yearns to share an experience? What difference does it make you? If you're there to derive your own pleasure and benefit, then what difference does it make you if you eat your steak with somebody else or not? Right? He says, you really want to give. It's a nitzot koach hanasina. A person enjoys being able to give at the same time that they're enjoying. Okay? So everybody has this spark. Some people it's a high level, some people it's very minimally developed, but it's there for everybody.
Would one be able to argue and say that there's power in receiving and like being interacted with, and that would make me feel belonging and like, meaning it's not necessarily only giving, but there's receiving as well.
So that's a very good question, and the question is, why is it always the men who pay for dates? And in other words, the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu made men and women is obviously somewhat different. I think men are designed to be able to have more opportunities to give than women do, and probably because we need them more than they do. But I think that in essence, when you go into such a relationship, each person is, and he's going to elaborate on this, each person is looking to give, even if they look like they're receiving, they're giving something else. If nothing else, of course, that's over. Okay. Now, the next statement is already not so true nowadays, and Rabbi Weinberg remarks this, one of his shurim, he says, society tries to, as time goes by, to make us more and more selfish, more and more self-centered, and more focused on ourselves. But he says, in theory, it used to be true at least, everybody wants children. In two aspects of wanting children, right? He wants his children to be an extent. He feels the children are an extension of himself. After he leaves the world. In other words, every person has this ambition for immortality, which obviously comes from some divine spark within the neshama, because animals don't seem to care about immortality. So there is some spark of immortality. A person wants to be immortal, can't be immortal yourself. Continuity is the next best thing after immortality. So let's have children. But this is much more profound. A person feels a necessity and a compunction to have somebody who he's going to love and to whom he's going to direct his good. We know children are the biggest pain in the neck. It makes no sense to want to have children, right? They're the cause of the most anxiety, the most difficulty, the most pressure in our lives, right? That people want to have kids. It's a very strange phenomenon, right? Because most pain is caused by kids, and yet we all want to have kids. So because he says the person has an intrinsic need to have somebody who's going to love and to whom he's going to give. And we see that by people who are who don't have any children, people who weren't able to give birth. They'll bring orphans into their house to adopt them and have children, and have them as children. Even a person, even people, this is a remarkable thing. It makes sense. People want, as a lot of people have animals because they want to give and they don't have inclination to have children for whatever reason. But an animal is much more, much safer to a large extent.
Is adoption is very random. Nothing to do with this, but is adoption in the Torah anywhere? Does it talk about it at all?
It says called Magalo Yoslam B'Basok Beisok Lodo. So yes, it's supposed to take somebody who has no children. It's a big mile to take them in. If somebody's not Jewish, the child's not Jewish, so then it doesn't really apply. But we see that it would be a tremendous thing to adopt a Jewish child.
So why didn't Avram think about that? Or are you saying he had Yishmael also?
Well, I don't. They had. I'm sure they had many kids. They adopted. As a nefesh shasu b'charon, right? They didn't. There are many people, but they still wanted to have their own children. Mm-hmm. It's so. They have a dog. Or other animals. By the way, I read something amazing yesterday. Where did I read it? I don't remember. But that they've done studies, and they know that dogs actually eventually understand words. We think that dogs commands. What?
Commands.
Yep. So they understand. In other words, they don't understand the tone. At least I was taught they understand the tone of voice. They understand, but they do understand words. They recognize words.
I think you mentioned also last time, like in terms of like they had they want to do a test with people to see if they would pass the smart test, and they eventually did it with dogs, and they were able to pass the test also. They have, if you train a person, if you train a thing or an animal, eventually, I mean, you can't take the dog out.
You're right, and I probably did mention this because I forgot about it. Right. There was a dog that the guy trained. They had a vocabulary of 300 words. The way the dog spoke was by going to places on a board, right, where there were words, and that's how there
are buttons you can buy to train your dog, and you
right,
have the
same idea.
Say a word, and you can put out, then there are different colors.
Yeah,
and the dog won't know what to ask for based on which
yeah.
button it is.
So that makes sense. It makes sense that people have this attraction to dogs. And they're going to do good things to them just the same as they would do to children. Is also so even those people who don't want to have interactions with other human beings, they'll have interactions with their dogs or other animals. Okay, so now we have a very important question, which stands before us. It actually is such an important question, I can't stress how important it is. Love and giving come together. Is giving a derivative of love, or the opposite. Love is derived from giving. What's the chicken and what's the egg? What comes first? Actually, that's not a good example because we don't know what comes first in that case. But anyway, what's the cause and what's the effect? Is love the cause and giving is the effect? In other words, you fall in love with somebody, you want to give them a gift, right? Or is it you give, and then that's the cause, and then the effect is love? Here, so it's coming. Or habituated thinking that giving is a derivative of love. If you love somebody, you're going to do good things. You're going to give them gifts. You're going to do them favors. But the second explanation is a person loves the fruit of his activity. If he feels an extension of himself. part of himself. In Benyeh, if it's a child, a she'olad who gave birth to, or imain, or raised, or chaya, asher gidel, or an animal that he raised, im tzemach asher nota, even a plant which you planted, or im gamin domain, or something, even something inanimate, like a house which you built. He know the vok l'masei yodav b'ahava. A person clings to those things which he created with love. Because he finds himself in them. And there's a source of this. If you want to love your friend more, having no saving tavaso, then help him out. Negotiate for him, do activities for him, for his behalf. You come to love something in which you invest. People love a shul because they're invested in the shul. It's not that they come to the shul and they love the shul. They invest in the shul, then it becomes an extension of themselves. People love, like you said, a house because they invest themselves in their house. People love a child because they're intrinsically invested in the child. All these things mean that I invest in something, I come to love it. This is a very profound love. See what it says in the Torah. Which is the only source. To know the depths of the powers of the soul completely. Knows the mysteries of the soul which he created. So these are people who don't go out to war, to Rapsur, to Mechem. You built a house and you didn't yet inaugurate your living therein. Somebody planted a vineyard, but was not able to, the fourth year, to redeem the fruit and eat it. Who's the person who got engaged to a woman and didn't yet marry her? They all come back from being soldiers, fresh, without any distinction. Which is astonishing if you think about it. How can you compare a wife to a house? How can you compare a wife to a vineyard? The Torah says, you know what? The love a person has in any of these things develops the same way. When you put yourself into something, you love that thing. And the Torah is telling us, and it's an amazing thing if you think about it, that the love itself is the reason why we let you come back for more. This is something which you loved so much, and it'll be such a tragedy. And people, we perceive it as a tragedy, the Torah perceives it as a tragedy, if after all that love you put into this thing, you wouldn't be able to reap the benefits, enjoy the use thereof. So that's he said. So he says, "Believe fresh, no difference." The says they're all parallel to each other. This the love which we have for things which we plant, for things which we build, is like the love of being engaged. This comes from giving, without doubt. The more you give, the more you love.
Sounds like more love is investment.
Yeah, I use the word
invested time.
Yes, invest. No, it
doesn't mean giving.
Right, but he's saying that is that's giving in the larger sense. In other words, it doesn't mean necessarily I'm giving a specific thing. I'm giving of myself to that. I'm investing from myself into that. Right, that's something which I put into, and that's a giving, not of a physical sort necessarily, although that can do. Yes, giving time, giving effort, and giving other parts of my soul. I saw a case. There are young parents who saw all that was precious in their life in their small child. In a time of an emergency, and a war burst out in that place. Everybody fled the battlefield. It happened. The enemies divided among those who had been together. V'avim b'noni shul tzad echad. The father with son remain on one side. V'aim with tzad sheni, and the mother on the other side. The koni frudu, and this way they were separate. Biyagonam v'gagueim with their sorrow and with their yearning. Kama shanim for several years. Adasher shokta milchama until the war quieted down. V'ashlom shalom milchama, and the peace returned to its place. V'asvadu yachta b'nei mishpach kula. So the people of the family came back together again. And they were very happy with each other. V'nei pella, there's astonishing thing what happened. They were not able to fix that which they were missed in that time. The father's love for the son was much more intense than the mother's love for the son, which of course is normally it's the opposite. And normally it's the opposite because normally it's the mother who's invested much more in her children from the time of pregnancy and onwards than the father. Usually it's the father's love which is not as intense as the mother's love. The mother's love is like the paragon of the paradigm of love in this world. But here it didn't happen, right? Because it didn't happen. She left him as a child and found him as adult. It was as if this is another person for her. She was still yearning for the small child in which she invested herself. But it's in her own imagination. So where's the root of this thing? It's the same person. Because it's the father who raised and helped the child grow instead of her. That's what she was missing. The shav ela av mikama, which went instead of to her, that giving when it was to the father. The love which came from the giving was entirely that of the father's, even though again normally it's that of the mother, much more powerfully than the father. But where there was no mother in this case, then either the father was the one who had that was giving all the time, and therefore the love between the father and son was more intense. So again, the reason why love of a mother is usually more intense is because the mother is usually one who gives more to the child. And there's cases where that's not true. This is one of those cases. Vam Rabbeinu Chazal said, "Ohev lisbrok l'sonei litom, mitzvah v'sonei kedei lekufas yitzro." If you have, there's two donkeys, and they're both collapsing under their burden. The other way. There's a donkey which is collapsing under its burden, and a donkey which needs to have its burden placed on its back. So it's a mitzvah to do both, but they're both mitzvahs. It's a mitzvah to help somebody relieve the burden of his donkey, and it's a mitzvah to help somebody put a burden on his donkey when, of course, he needs help in order to travel, whatever he has to do. Obviously, it's more of a mitzvah to help because of Tzar Baalei Chaim. It's more of a mitzvah to help the person with the donkey, which is collapsing under its weight. But it's one sense that it has this case. You have a person who you love, a friend, and his animal is collapsing under its weight. And then you have a person you can't stand, an enemy, and his animal needs to be loaded with weight. So, oev lifrok v'stoni liton, mitzvah b'sonei kedei lekufas yitzro. It's a mitzvah to actually, even though normally, if all things were equal, of course you'd help remove the burden. But here, in order to submit your Yetzer Hara, you're supposed to actually help the person you don't like. Okay? By the way, this is true not just with donkeys. If you have somebody you don't like, you should go out of your way to help them. Why is that? So he says, even though by removing the load, you also prevent Tzar Baalei Chaim, Shumi D'Oraisa, which is a Torah issue. Nevertheless, for you to work on your midos is more important. And there's a manner, this is there's also this thing, he says, the words Kedei Lekufas Yitzro might not be literally translated as what he's about to say, but this is also true. Ki be'tivul sono, when you do good to your enemy, gam hu atzmo tistalek hasina milibo. The hatred will leave your heart. V'tikones tachtea avas hanosein el makabel menu. There's going to be the love from the giver to the person who receives. If your eyes are open, you'll see many times this case. Now, by the way, it doesn't. The other way around doesn't work necessarily. There's the saying that, "Why does he hate me so much? I never did him a favor," which is that it means that very often, because if I receive something with somebody, I don't want to like him, because if I like him, then it means that I have to be makir tov to him. I have to be nice to him. I have to submit to him. I have to get back to him. So therefore, very often, a person to whom you did tremendous favors, whom you invested, is no interest whatsoever in loving you. It's a human nature. It's a negative part of human nature, but it's human nature. And you have these cases in which the person who gives loves the person they're giving, the person receiving turns the other way. So if you have somebody who you detest, the way to get over that is by giving to that person.
Which is interesting, because they say on Purim is that you're supposed to give them not the matas of them, the
shlach
manos really to the people you don't like.
Right.
To bring them back into your life.
Right. So that's exactly the point. And sometimes when there's a kid I particularly don't. The kid in school I particularly don't like, or is particularly obnoxious. Mm-hmm. So I'm not such a big tzaddik, but sometimes I make an effort to specifically invest in that kid, because then you overcome that. Like there's one kid, 6th grade, we went on a trip. He was 6th grade. I was teaching 6th grade at the time. Went on a field trip, and he made so much trouble on the bus. The bus driver said, "Just because it's one kid, I'm never going to drive a yeshiva again." So. I was really, really angry. I wanted him suspended. I wanted the book thrown at him. And then, I decided, I'm going to make a special effort. And this is one of the kids who, even though he was now in 10th grade, I taught him in 8th grade last, he still has a connection with me. And if you can make an effort, a special effort to somebody who doesn't like you, of course, it's not always possible. Because sometimes they hate you too, and it's hard for you to bridge that gap. But if you can bridge that gap, it's an amazing thing. It can actually bring tremendous advantage. That's love, perhaps, but tremendous affection, which otherwise would not exist.
And most times it turns out that when someone's mad at somebody, I want to say 90%, but a good solid 80% of the time, the guy doesn't even realize, or the person doesn't realize you're upset. You're just upset,
right?
For no reason.
You're eating yourself
all
up.
you have to do is just bring it up, and that's over with.
Right. That's definitely true. Yes.
It's just.
Yep. Close the door. So this is a general principle. Whatever you give to your friend, is not lost from you. Don't think if you give, you lose. It's an extension of yourself. Because now you feel a part in that friend to whom you gave. And again, we're not talking about giving money. That's the easy part of giving, right? That's the lowest form of tzedakah is giving money, right? The highest type of tzedakah is to help a person out, put them on their feet and give them a profession. So the giving of oneself, as opposed to one's money, is a much higher and more profound thing, and has a much more of an effect. And I should understand that I don't lose out by giving to somebody else. I extend myself, and in that person now I can be found as well. That's the dveikus between a person and another person, which we call love. And of course, I'm not sure if he's going to say this, but it's a davar pashut. Ava is related to the Aramaic word hav. Hav means to give. Right? So the Zohar criticizes Jews who come to Shul Rosh Hashanah Kippur and talking kekelev hav hav. They shout, they bark like a dog, woof woof. Right? Hav hav sounds like woof woof. Hav hav means gimme gimme. So they say people come to shul, they miss the boat. Right, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is supposed to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not to stand there and say, give me this, give me that. But have means to give. So ahava means for me to be giving to somebody else.
Does the word ahava, by definition, mean one person to another?
No, he said before, it can be to a rock. It can be the building.
Meaning, what I'm getting at is basically, is ahava is pointed inwards towards myself. Is that self-destructive? It is.
Of course, self-love, yeah.
But
That's one of the crazy things about pop psychology that they talk about. First, I have to love myself.
No.
I never understood. I simply don't understand what the words mean. You see it all the time. I learned to love myself. It makes no sense, right? Maybe you mean you're giving to yourself, but how do you love yourself more? Because you're giving to yourself. You are yourself. So, no. Loving oneself is not destructive. We looked at it with Shimon. Loving oneself, but as long as one expands one's sense of self, right?
But then that by definition includes others.
Right, that's the point. In other words, yourself has to include others. And the way Rav Dessler is taking it a step further, he's saying, how do you include others? How do others become extension of yourself?
Give from oneself.
By giving, right. That expands yourself to everybody to whom you give.
Is that why the best, Hashem wanted to be native to the highest degree, and that's why Hashem gives.
Right. Chazal is saying, they Moshe for it. They say, Yosem Masha ego rotzelino kapar rotzelanik. More than the calf wants to nurse, the cow wants to nurse the calf. So giving is such a powerful, built-in principle of good creation on all levels, but the person very often doesn't realize that. That's why the idea he's going to get to love between man and woman in the Perek Vav, but which we'll do next week. But the idea of falling in love is a very, very not foreign idea. It's antithesis of what love is. You don't fall in love; you fall in infatuation. You develop love. You have to make a conscious effort to love someone, and that's why a person has to have. Years ago, there was an article in Jewish Observer written by Rabbi, what's his name again, from Concord, Rabbi Waxman, which he says the misnagdim should adopt a Hasidic way of dating. 2-3 dates at most, and then you get engaged. So I was very, very upset at that article. I wrote a letter to the editor. I was too afraid to publish it under my own name, so I published it under my mother's maiden name, Yosef Shochet, from Ramapo, New York. But the Jewish Observer letter to the editor used to get the same vetting and editing as the articles. So if they did not approve of the sentiment of the letter, they would not approve it. No, not publish it. So they obviously understood, okay, that's not so good that we publish this article without any counterpoint. And I wrote how, a lot of it based on this Rav Dessler, how in dating, optimally speaking, you're supposed to build a relationship. And the relationship is supposed to be one which is leading, obviously, to love. And the way that works is by investing in the relationship, which, of course, he's going to expand upon later on. We'll stop here for tonight. We'll pick up with Perek next week.